This is an exciting show today. I can't wait to share with you the prophecies and prophetic perspective of Chris Reed. The boxes that have been discovered in Biden's garage were actually prophesied in December, and so much more. But one of the interesting words that this young man had has to do with the disruption of the economy and the food supply, and that eventually there's going to be really a need for returning back to Americans having to grow their own food. I want you to know something. Peace of mind comes when you have food already in your house prepared for an emergency. If you've not done it and you're thinking of doing it, you've simply got to take action. Go to lancewallnau.com/patriot and get a hold of one of the many combinations of resources they have. They're on sale right now. Get them in your garage. Get them available. You know what? Enough for you and for your children and for somebody else. lancewallnau.com/patriot. It's worth the investment in your own peace of mind to know that you can handle 2 weeks or 3 weeks of disrupted food supply and get by and take care of somebody else at the same time. lancewallnau.com/patriot. Let's get into the prophetic dialogue. Welcome back again to the Lance Wallnau Show. All of you that are looking for what is happening now, what's about to happen, and where do you go to find out exactly a perspective that can both give you encouragement, but not be giving you Kool-Aid either, because what we want to do is see reality. Reality will strengthen you. When you know the truth has the power to set you free if you're treating it properly. So today, Mercedes Sparks, we have Chris Reed for a whole second segment on our show. Chris has been with us talking. For those of you that missed it yesterday, you got to watch the show. Yes. We were discussing a prophecy that Chris Reed had given in, I guess it was December 29th, 2022 at Morningstar at a conference that they do, vision conference for the coming year. And he had given this word right before the news came out about the Biden boxes. And it was a word which was titled Biden and Boxes and Billionaires. Chinese bribery will be exposed, and their influence in American politics, swinging the 2020 election, will come to light and be undeniable. Now, there's a proposition. We're just going to circle that. Is this the year in which the 2020 election is going to be discussed again? Or will they be able to move on from that? This is going to be tied in with Hunter Biden's laptop scandal, which will go in full exposure. I see inquiries in boxes being opened, which will reveal the smoking gun secrets that will prove China's involvement and Chinese money involved with Biden's election. Secrets being exposed even through the courts and House inquiries that will shock the world. Boxes, 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 listed 3 times, full of horrible stuff. And what we are now aware of, as we bring Chris Reed back on the show, is that the Biden administration knew before the midterms that they had already discovered classified information that didn't belong in Biden's University of Penn. I guess Communist China built $57 million contribution to Penn. University of Penn had a kind of like a Biden wing there where he kept some documents. And then he had other documents at his house. But what disturbs us is the fact that they knew about these before the midterms, but kept it under wraps so that nobody else knew that Biden had confidential, important documents that had no security protocol. I mean, having them in a box in your garage next to your Corvette isn't exactly high-level security. And some of these documents are of a very high and sensitive nature. And then I'm not sure what that means. We're all getting educated all the time. The average American is getting civics 101, 201, and 301 ever since Trump showed up. But let's assume that the reason why they're going through those boxes right now, and they didn't do it a year ago. I mean, think about how dumb you got to be. They didn't even do it when Mar-a-Lago was raided by the FBI. I right away would have said, hey, you know, if those Republicans get control of the gavel after midterms, they're coming after us. We better go make sure we don't have any boxes of stuff hanging out in the backyard. Well, right in your garage. They should have been doing this a year ago. But just lets you know that God has his way in the whirlwind. Here's the interesting thing, Chris. The word on the street is that it's because the subpoenas in Delaware on the trial for Hunter Biden's laptop have already begun. So evidence is being secured, and the only place that they can locate the evidence is on the hard drive, and looking for the hard copy that goes with it. They go to Biden's garage to pull out the emails between him and Hunter and the agreements with Bobulinski and the Chinese government CEOs and billionaires. There's your billionaires who are doing business with the Bidens. And that's where the smoking gun is of your prophecy. And I think you really hit it. And I know you don't study this stuff. Like some of us are like poring over these things, like a detective novel. You're getting it as a prophetic dream and an impression. And some of it's kind of like abstract in a way, but specific enough so that you're actually seeing what you're seeing. So real quick question, Chris, do you believe that what's going to come out will be more than the Biden money making off of Hunter selling influence, and that you think there's going to be some kind of an evidence of election interference, or would anybody be dumb enough to put in writing, let's have an agreement here, you're going to steal the election, right? We'll all sign the document. I can't imagine those documents being there. So how do you see that happening? Or do you?
Well, it's funny you said, it's funny you said, I don't see anybody dumb enough to do that. Once again, we're talking about a whole different group of people here that they're a different breed. And yeah, I actually do. I think that the evidence will mount up, to the point to where he will have his own Democratic allies no longer have confidence and support in him, and he'll have to make a decision at some point whether he's going to run again in 2024. I think the pressure will ultimately come upon him to step aside, whether it be health, whether it be mounting legal problems, and he will redeem his legacy, by putting a woman in his place as president, since Kamala Harris is the vice president. But yes, I do think this will come. And I, as I said in yesterday's broadcast, October 22nd, 2020, I saw over 2 years ago, Biden, his brother and son were leveraging millions of dollars from the Communist Chinese Party, and the media that had refused to cover it. And that was, remember when they refused to cover the New York Post story about the Hunter Biden laptop. I said, the Lord showed me in prayer, they will be forced to cover it. Even partisans will be forced to cover this. And that was October 22nd, 2020, as you have it there.
Wow. So we're going to see this story unfolding, and I think God will keep on talking to you. I always want to see the prophets rise up like Elisha in the Old Testament, who was eavesdropping virtually on the tent of what his enemies were doing, and telling the rulers of Israel, here's what they're saying, here's what they're thinking, because he could hear them. That's the ultimate prophetic surveillance technology of heaven. We don't see much of it, but when we see it, it's important, because you were getting this download when the Democrat Party was already going through boxes and keeping a lid on this so that it wouldn't leak out for the midterms. But you were sneaking into the tent and finding out what's hidden in the box while they're hiding the boxes and trying to cover up the boxes. So I love that you're doing that, and I want to encourage you to keep doing that. Now, we also covered some economic forecast information. The part of your dream or vision, was this a dream or a vision, by the way?
Yeah, from March 2022. Yeah, it was the dream, the $50 bill dream.
Okay. So you have a dream where it's being torn up, and each time it's torn up, a third of it's torn up, and then what's remained is torn in half, and then what's remaining of that is torn into little piecemeal. And the part that struck me is there's basically 3 stages of devaluation going on, and then you got headlines. Those of you that didn't catch the broadcast, go back and catch it all. But it led into food shortages, and Americans, going back to growing their own food, et cetera, riots and civil unrest as we go to that final stage. And then you said there was like a cell phone $1 bill kind of like a $1 bill type picture, which I assume is a digital currency, is the final iteration after all this meltdown. The paper currency is out of the way. Now we're starting to go towards the system of the global currency, and Americans now have a digital currency. Is that pretty much where you saw this ending?
Yeah, the $50 bill, I think, represented the monetary value of the 50 United States, and how in a progression of months and years, one thing led to another that ultimately led us off of the dollar that we're on now to some sort of digital currency. And I think that we're going to see that happen. And so, yeah, food shortage. This was not something that I just predicted at the end of 2022. This was in March of 2022, so almost a year ago, and what documented, time stamped, and all of that before this stuff started really going down. And in fact, I have another prophecy that I had actually had back in June of 2021, which I'll make sure is sent to you. But it said, I saw Sarah Sanders becoming the governor of Arkansas, June of 2021. I also saw an explosion in New York, a building crumbling, and I also saw 1976 level high inflation. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing. Joe Biden is Jimmy Carter's administration 2.0. I mean, think about Jimmy Carter: high inflation, high interest rates, high gas prices, foreign policy in crisis. You had the Iranian hostage situation. I've also prophesied an Iranian revolution back 2 and 3 years ago. I have documented where I have evidence. I prophesied it again at New Year's 2023, a Chinese internal revolution. So there's a lot of these things that I think that are going to happen. And I have something else I'd like to share. One last thing. I saw back in January 19th of 2019, as your staff has this, they'll bring up there, I was taken in the realm of the spirit, and I saw two things. The second thing was in the ocean, you'll see a significant toxic spill into the ocean, oil and or radiation that will represent how polluted and corrupt the earth is now. We must pray for God to cleanse us and our land to bring healing. So it's almost like, and I prophesied this on December 29th, 2022, from a vision that I have written down here in January of 2019. I saw a third test, coming for Ron DeSantis. The first test was how he handled COVID in Florida as governor. The second test is how he handled Hurricane Ian, which happened in October of 2022, which I also had predicted in June of 2021. And I believe you've talked about that previously. But I believe there's a third test that will determine what he passes, whether he will be a future leader of America in D.C. And that will be this oil spill that I see coming in the natural in Florida. And I predicted that this will happen, and I see it now. It will be a sign of the pollution or this toxicity, or so to speak, that our land needs healed and our land needs cleaned. And I want to, if I may, add one last thing. I know I've talked a lot and I'll shut up, but I've shared this with my team. This is the first time I've shared this publicly. So this is a new prophecy, but I think that you'll hear it. I shared this with Rick. I shared this with others. This is the latest encounter that I had with the Lord. I was taken into the Capitol Rotunda in Washington, D.C. This was in a trance vision, in the second week of January of 2023. I was taken into a trance vision into the Capitol Rotunda, where a lot of times, you have figures, national politicians lie in state when they die. It was a funeral. And I walked up and I saw the casket of someone in the casket in the Capitol Rotunda, and it was lying in state, Jimmy Carter. And, it was natural causes. He's old. He's in his 90s now. So that's not like some surprise. but there was a note that was on the casket at the end of the casket, and it said, a time marker, the death of Jimmy Carter, the natural death of Jimmy Carter, will be a signpost for the death of the Joe Biden administration.
Wow, that certainly makes sense, doesn't it? The death of, and that's breaking news, folks. I mean, I haven't heard that one before. Most of these I know about
Never
before I
shared
talk
it.
to you. Thanks for breaking that one on me. And that goes
Sorry.
with, no, I love it. That goes right with the last time that we had a national, observation of the passing of a statesman was Billy Graham, and his passing, and Donald Trump, who had officiated there and prayed that God would raise up a new generation of Billy Grahams for America, which I thought was interesting. So the death of the Biden administration, the passing of Jimmy Carter, but you've also mentioned two leaders in the West that would die. I think Putin and Biden, I think at some point you said would both pass off the scene in proximity to each other in the same year or so?
Fairly close together.
Yeah.
Yes. And the encounter that I had, they would be fairly close together. And the first time I prophesied this publicly, I have it documented, March the 1st, 2022, I saw the end of Putin's reign. So this would have been like 4 or 5 days after the start of the Ukraine war. I shared it here publicly. I put it in a note to timestamp it. We're starting to share these on our website now so that we have these actually documented on a website, morningstarministries.org. But yes, I did see the death of Vladimir Putin, or the end rather of his reign. I saw the death of his rulership, and I believe the death of him. But I saw that he would be brought out of power, and so would Biden, and it would be fairly close together when they both came out of power before their terms of their allotted time in office were over.
That's interesting. Go ahead, Mercedes.
I just had a question. So, Chris, the natural disaster, the oil or the toxic spill, was that here close to the States, or could that be globally anywhere?
Florida.
I believe that was
Florida?
in the state of Florida.
Wow.
Because I saw it connected to the third test for Ron DeSantis.
Wow.
And if he passed the test, he can be a future president. And so, yeah, I think this is a third test for him. And he's tremendously passed the first two. There's no doubt about it. How he responded to COVID in Florida, it's still the freest state, one of the freest states in the union, and how he responded to Hurricane Ian in the fall of 2022. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, he did the best that he could. I think he passed those tests, but I think he has one more. And it's got to do with this toxic spill, this oil spill, which, as I said, I can, you'll have it there to be brought up on the screen there. I saw it back in 2019.
Wow. And
so I shared it again at the end of this year, or the end of 2022 for 2023 and beyond prophecies.
I do also want to come back to the question at my last broadcast that I would like for both of you to answer. But that's just me. We went back into the prophecies, but I really want to go into the Jeremiah scripture you guys were talking about.
All right, so the question that Mercedes is talking about is, and we only got 9 minutes for this, but it's a very hot subject. While we're talking about prophecy, and we're not really even discussing in depth here how prophecy works, or how do you hear, how do you see, how do you judge it, and what do you do with a prophecy that isn't fulfilled exactly as it was seen, there's another issue, and that is that somewhere around the time that fake news started becoming the mouth of the false prophet in America. And that's what I said. I predicted that the media mountain would become taken over by the false prophet, a world ruler, a spirit that would be lying. And indeed it did. And so interwoven with the intelligence community and the political spirit that it became a political false prophecy spirit, much like Jezebel had the government, and false prophets were her partners in administrating her false religion, which was, her integration of her own hedonism with the politics of that era. And the parallels are so clear. But then the prophets began popping up. At first, it was just a couple of us, Jeremiah Johnson, Kat Kerr, and me. And there was like, hey, Trump is going to be, we believe, God's chaos candidate, God's chosen candidate.
Kat Kerr said that?
Kat Kerr said that Trump would be elected twice and that Pence would be elected twice.
Yeah, but you were the one that called Trump originally.
Yeah,
one
I know
of
that.
three.
I know. Yes,
I just want to clarify. In 2016,
no,
you called it.
Saying
2020, you called that we would lose.
The landscape is chock full of prophets that are prophetic right now in politics. But when I started, it was a lonely journey.
Okay.
Gradually, they started picking up and following Trump as Trump won the primaries. And he became more and more. And then prophets picked up on it. And they started having more. Jeremiah Johnson and I were the first ones that had that this was an Isaiah 45 president.
Jeremiah was out there.
That he would be a Cyrus. That was back then. So, I can remember then noticing that, and then the word that the Lord gave me was Trump derangement and Trump derangement syndrome, because I remember being in the car with you when Rush Limbaugh used the term, and I said, oh my gosh, that's the term I'm using.
Yep.
And so I realized it was out in the airwaves, was picking it up. So I knew I was hearing something. And then when Kamala Harris had lost her run for being a candidate for president, remember that, disastrous? I had said 3 months earlier that she would end up in the White House. And I thought, man, have I missed it? And then when Biden picked her up as a VP candidate, I said, this is scary. I was actually hearing. Then I kind of have to tell you the truth. I backed up from even wanting to get involved with the prophetic politically because I felt that it was out of order. That people were looking more for predictions about who's going to be president than they were about what is God saying, because what God's saying is bigger than who's going to get elected. And you don't want to end up becoming adolescent in the prophetic and appealing to the crowd's curiosity. What you want to do is say what the Lord is saying. And so I started pulling back, but I got my ear to the ground regarding what the prophets are saying. And now we have a whole generation of prophets who were so sold, Chris, on Trump being reelected, and there's followers. I mean, they're very confused now, but there's hundreds of thousands. I run into them all the time when I'm even on Flashpoint. They're double down and triple down on, well, the fact is Biden, whether you want him as a legitimate president or not, he's the guy in the Oval Office. He's signing the documents. He's the pilot in the seat, whether you like it or not, whether he's legitimate or not. He got there, and God somehow allowed it to happen. He allowed the lawlessness to do what lawlessness is doing. And he's doing a greater work right now, as we'll find out in America, than if we just had Trump forced back in.
Yeah, but I want to jump in while you take a breath here, because you did actually predict that Trump would lose to mail-in ballots. You predicted that in the book. So you don't toot your own horn. So I'm just going to toot it for you. And I'm like, toot-a-loot, you got it right twice. So, and it's not the word anybody wanted. That's the point. Both times.
That's why I don't like talking about these things.
Nobody wanted Trump the first time. None of the Christians wanted to vote for him.
Nobody wanted the first time, and everybody in my group wanted him to win the second time. And we wrote and said, it'll be stolen. The ballots are going to come in. There's going to be a news blackout. We named 3 out of the 5 states that we do. It was remarkable, actually. And then it's like, that's it. I'm just going to go do news now and be prophetic in a 30,000-foot view. But what I want to say is, Chris, you have your own lane you run in. Of course, with Rick Joyner, you guys have very strong worldviews, and there's words that Rick has had over time that have been proven and at times controversial. But there really is, there's a battle, I think, now that we're not fighting it because we don't want it. But there really is a need for a dialogue about the prophetic, because I'm wanting to get together the prophets that are hearing, and I don't require from anybody, 100% accuracy, because I travel with Kim Clement. And the secret for Kim was to swing for the fences, and if something didn't work out, to get back up and go again, because it was too important to keep the prophetic voice alive than to drop back and play it safe. So I admire those of you that go out there, and I'll always protect you guys that go out there. But there is a difference between, now I'm sensing it, prophetic camps are actually distinguishing themselves. And it used to be like, kind of like a free-for-all, and we'd all get along. Now I'm sensing a separation, a polite kind of Cold War, if you will. But there's a division in the prophetic, because I think God is setting us up to need to hear more clearly what he's doing. And it isn't about Trump and DeSantis. It's a bigger story in America than who's going to be the next president. What are your thoughts on all this?
I think this is not a new problem. I think there in the scripture in Jeremiah chapter 23, I encourage people to read it. We see this play out in a previous generation. Jeremiah was predicting that his generation, that Babylon would come and overthrow Jerusalem, destroy the temple, and take the Jewish people slaves. The other prophets that the Bible calls false prophets, they were the ones saying, we're God's people, we're God's chosen, God's going to fight, we're never going to lose. You know, Babylon is not going to overthrow Judah. Babylon is not going to take us captive into Babylonian captivity. We're going to win. And that's what the people wanted to hear. Everybody wants to believe the best for their country. Everybody wants to believe that God wants them to win, that God is endorsing them, protecting them, and only saying what is advantageous to their point of view or their nation or their candidate. But the Lord said to Jeremiah, they're false prophets. They're sharing one another's words. They're copycatting one another's words. The Lord said this. I'm not accusing anybody of that. But he said, who has stood in the counsel of the Lord? Jeremiah, what makes you stand out above the other prophets is they're only telling the people of Judah what they want to hear, that they're not going to lose, that Babylon will not take them into captivity, that will not destroy their city. But you are saying it will happen because that is what is going to happen, and that is what God is actually saying. It wasn't popular. Okay, but that was the difference between a false prophet and a real prophet. Who has stood in the counsel of the Lord? False prophet is not somebody that just, well, they missed it a little bit, you know, and so therefore, because they missed it, the Old Testament standard says they're a false prophet. No, Paul said in the New Testament, that New Covenant prophecy, we know in part, we all prophesy in part. So I'm only responsible to prophesy my part, you're to prophesy your part, they're to prophesy their part. When we try to prophesy more than the part we get and we fill in the gaps, that's when we get in trouble as prophetic people. But the difference, I'll summarize it with this. This is what happens when people get in echo chambers and they only prophesy to the people that are the cheerleaders and are telling them, we're going to win. Our candidate's going to win because God's for us and we can't lose. That is what made them a false prophet, was not because they heard wrong. It's because they caved to the pressure to keep getting the clicks, likes, and follows, to keep the crowd watching so that they would be popular and people would like them and that people would listen to them, even though that's not what God was saying.
You know, I have to say this might go down wrong, but one of the things that was interesting with Kim is he was a worshiper and he would go to the keyboard and he put a lot of energy into worshiping, and he would worship kind of, and prophetically he did that. And part of the reason he did it is because the pressure on him was so strong to have to constantly pop out prophecies because he was known as a prophet, that it wore him down. And he said, think about it, Lance. He said, if we have a healing meeting and a couple of people get out of wheelchairs, like William Branham's meetings, there was a couple of notable miracles, maybe 3 or 4 that were really conspicuous in a meeting. Everybody talks about it. But if you are a prophet and you only give 3 or 4 people meaningful, in-depth words of knowledge, it produces kind of a disappointment in everyone else that came looking for a word. He said he felt like the disappointment of the crowd because the people that didn't get one wanted one. Yeah. And he was prophesying by a word of knowledge, not bubbling up prophet, which is legitimate prophecy. Yeah. But like, you know, Jim Gall, Cindy Jacobs, Bill Hammond, that flow is like they bring it up from the well. Kim would be like an Elijah type who had to get a word. He prophesied the word he heard. And so he's dealing with a vision or a word, which is a different kind of a realm, very dramatic, very powerful. The other ones are just as powerful, but less theatric. Yeah. So he went to music and played, and he would do half of his ministry would be music in order to take the pressure off the demand for prophecy. People don't know that, but that was the reason why I went to the keyboard. Wow. Because of the exorbitant group, but he didn't want to cave into the pressure of giving them what they wanted. He wanted to, so he gave more to the Lord, what the Lord wanted, which was worship. And let me just put in a real plug here. I know that it's at the end of the show and people sometimes aren't listening all the way at the end, but I want to say something. I saved thousands of dollars because Mercedes did something unique this week. I got so mad. I was trying to get airplane tickets to go to Israel. And then every time I looked at them, the tickets were going up. And I noticed that they go up. And I think they actually have an algorithm where they raise the price when you go back to create this feeling like, I better hurry up. You ever notice that? The prices are going up. That's actually a manipulated tactic that the airline industries use.
Yes. And when I run for Congress, that's one of my issues. That algorithm needs to end, because I've been on a plane before where it was $500, and by the time I got off the plane, it was $2,000. But I want to tell you how I did save Lance $2,000 this weekend. A little bit of a travel hack for those of you who want to travel international. Lance is going to visit family in Israel with his wonderful wife, Annabelle. And I was looking at flights with an IP address based here in Dallas, and the flights were like, man, they were like $9,000. The cheapest I could find was $9,000 per flight. And so then I said, well, you know what? I have this theory that if I switch the IP address using ExpressVPN to London, and I did that, I searched the same flights. I'm talking with the exact same time, same flights, different IP address was the only thing. And it was $2,000 cheaper. Can you believe that? That should be outlawed. Why is it like that?
So if any of you travel, try this out. Check it out for your hotels, for your reservations, for your cars, for your airfare. ExpressVPN.com/Lance. Get 3 months free. Check it out. Mm-hmm. You just basically give them, you stick it to the man. You go to another location. You're going to fake them out. You're going to look like you're in Europe. Yeah. Looking for tickets. So they're going to say, oh, the people in New York don't pay them the same price they pay in Texas. And so you get the European negotiated price.
I'm wondering if they've got different laws over there. That's what I was thinking. That maybe Europe, because they're pretty strict on laws.
They are. They're really,
internet laws, you know?
You're right. They do. They're socialists have some things together. So, anyway, expressvpn.com/Lance. Get 3 months free and let me know what you think about it. Be back again tomorrow.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge you have, the better it